Joining us now is Vince Coglianese, editorial director at the Daily Caller. Vince, welcome back. So good to see you. A lot to get to today, but first, I want to get your thoughts on the gun legislation that's being considered by lawmakers.
It's amazing that this piece of legislation was only available to the public for mere hours, not that long, before it went to its first vote in the United States Senate yesterday. We saw Senator Mike Lee react with some disdain for that process, and rightfully so. The American public is entitled to a fulsome debate around new legislation and has had very little chance to digest this bill as it's now rocketing its way through the United States Senate. The top line items on this: they want to increase funding to encourage states to adopt so-called red flag laws. That's basically provisions where somebody can report somebody that they're concerned about to government authorities, and then a judge can sign off on taking their gun away while it's adjudicated whether or not they deserve it back. Now, there are some massive constitutional issues there, especially due process rights and, yes, of course, Second Amendment rights. But Republicans and Democrats seem to have agreed on that front. They're pushing it through.
Yeah, and something else I'm going to talk about, which I know you know about. The White House unveiled its latest proposal to lower gas prices here in the U.S. Do you think this will help consumers, Vince?
I don't. Unfortunately, it won't. I think the point of this is to try and lower the price that appears at your local gas station for just the months leading up to the midterms. And then Democrats, ultimately led by Joe Biden, want to take credit for that as a way to convince the American public to keep them in power. Here's the issue, though. I'm already asking around among economists, and the answer I'm getting is this is not going to change anything in terms of inflation. Those prices are still going to be very high. It's only going to increase the government's deficit, and that will lead to ultimately those prices being stubborn and not coming down. So while you'll have the mirage of lower gas prices at the pump, ultimately those high prices are still going to be here for every American. And remember, Barack Obama, Joe Biden's Democrat predecessor, referred to this idea back in 2008 as a gimmick, and now his former vice president would like to do it in public.
And Vince, instead of this, this holiday, this gas tax holiday, what do you think the administration should be doing?
The administration needs to get out of the way of the development of new refineries in the United States. So just as a very basic principle, when oil and natural gas come out of the ground, when oil comes out of the ground, it has to go to these petroleum refineries where it's actually conditioned to become the products that we consume at the pump. It's divided out into gasoline and the petroleum basis for plastics. So the refineries are essential. And right now in the United States, our refineries are operating at maximum capacity. They can't take any more petroleum. And that's because refineries have been closing during the Biden administration, during the Obama administration, because of all of the pressure to get rid of fossil fuels and move to what Joe Biden says are renewable energies. The technology is just not there. And the reality is we need more of these fossil fuels for the economy to work. The Biden administration has to give that industry some confidence that it will exist in the decades to come and open up those refineries. That's what would actually bring these gas prices down and give us some independence and some security.
On a different note, primaries were held in a number of states yesterday. In addition, a closely watched Democratic congressional primary in Texas. Well, that finally came to an end after a recount that found Henry Cuellar, currently the only pro-life Democrat in the House of Representatives, to be the winner there. Your reaction to that, Vince?
It's a huge tell. It's just the latest version of this, by the way, where you're hearing from voters, especially in Texas, that what they want is typically like social conservative perspectives, things like being pro-life, and importantly, in Henry Cuellar's case, pro-border. The guy wants border security in Texas. He is upset with the Biden administration for leaving the border wide open and welcoming foreign nationals all across the border. And so he's been running basically against the Democrat establishment, and that includes, I think she'll be loath to hear me say it, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's very much an influencer within that establishment. She fashions herself a progressive. She wants to get rid of Henry Cuellar, but that failed this week. And the voters, I think, are sending a clear message that they'd like some security, they'd like less crime, and they'd like the babies to be born.
As we reported earlier, two more pro-life organizations were targeted this week in Minnesota and in Michigan. Vince, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. And do you think enough is being done, if anything, to stop these attacks?
Unfortunately, I don't. And the reason I say that is because it was like pulling teeth to get an answer out of the Justice Department of whether or not they were even following this. We still don't know who the suspects are behind these terror attacks. And yes, they are terror attacks on pro-life organizations across the country. An organization that's taken credit for those attacks, those fire bombings, is a group called Jane's Revenge. And just this past week, they released a letter suggesting that that was just the beginning, that they'd like to escalate those attacks beyond fire bombings. Now, we don't really know what that means, but we do know that there is a looming threat, and a serious government would seriously push back on it for the well-being of the public. So the Justice Department needs to do that, and the White House needs to issue a more fulsome statement than some random assistant press secretary saying that they're concerned about this. Truly, the government has an obligation to protect the people. And when there is a genuine threat out there, one that's already been acted upon and one that they're promising more will come from, that's the time that federal officials need to step up.
Well, Vince, we're going to leave it right there. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it and appreciate your perspective. Thanks again.